George Mitchell had worked at Kensington Palace for nearly 3 years as a maintenance technician. His days were usually predictable and quiet, involving routine checks of heating systems, electrical panels, and occasionally fixing a squeaky door hinge. He was a man in his early 50s, with graying hair and a calm demeanor that made him nearly invisible among the palace staff. That's exactly how he liked it. The less attention he drew, the easier his job became. On this particular Tuesday morning in late September, George arrived at the palace grounds just after dawn. The air was crisp and cool, with a thin layer of fog still clinging to the manicured lawns. He carried his worn leather tool bag and a thermos of strong tea as he made his way through the service entrance. His assignment for the day was straightforward. Check the security equipment in the storage facility located in the older wing of the palace complex. The storage facility was rarely visited by anyone except maintenance staff. It housed old furniture, archived documents, and various pieces of security equipment that were either outdated or waiting to be installed. George had been told that some new surveillance drones had been delivered the previous week and needed to be cataloged. It wasn't his usual type of work, but the regular security technician was on sick leave, and George had basic training with electronic systems. He unlocked the heavy wooden door and stepped into the dimly lit room. Rows of metal shelving units stretched from floor to ceiling, packed with boxes labeled with codes he didn't fully understand. George flicked on the overhead lights and began searching for the drone shipment. After several minutes of looking, he spotted 3 large black cases stacked near the back corner, marked with red security seals and warning labels. George approached the cases and knelt down beside them. He pulled out his work tablet to log the inventory numbers, but the device's battery was dead. Frustrated, he sighed and decided to at least inspect the drones visually to confirm they matched the delivery manifest. He carefully broke the seal on the first case and lifted the lid. Inside lay a sleek drone unlike anything George had seen before. It was matte black with 6 rotors and a sophisticated camera system mounted on its underside. The design was clearly military-grade, far more advanced than the simple security drones used for perimeter monitoring. George felt a slight unease but reminded himself that Royal Security had access to the best technology available. He noticed a small control panel built into the side of the case with several buttons and a digital display. Curious about the drone's specifications, George leaned closer to read the technical labels. His reading glasses had slipped down his nose, and as he pushed them back up, his elbow accidentally pressed against one of the buttons on the control panel. The display lit up immediately with a soft blue glow. George froze, his heart suddenly racing. Before he could react, he heard a mechanical worry sound. The drone's rotors began spinning slowly at first, then faster. Within seconds, the machine lifted smoothly out of its case and hovered at eye level, its camera lens rotating and focusing with quiet precision. George stumbled backward, knocking over his tool bag. Wrenches and screwdrivers clattered across the floor. He waved his hands frantically at the drone, trying to signal it to stop, but the machine ignored him completely. The camera swiveled in his direction, and a small red recording light blinked on. George's mouth went dry. This was not good. He lunged for the control panel, pressing buttons randomly in hopes of shutting the drone down. Instead, the machine rose higher, nearly touching the ceiling. Then, to George's absolute horror, it glided smoothly toward the open doorway. He scrambled to his feet and chased after it, but the drone was faster. It zipped through the door and into the corridor beyond. George ran after it, his footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. The drone moved with purpose, as if following a pre-programmed route. It turned corners with precision and climbed a spiral staircase leading to the main palace levels. George's lungs burned as he struggled to keep pace. He tried shouting for help, but his voice came out as a hoarse whisper. The palace was still mostly asleep. He encountered no one. The drone emerged into the grand corridor where several important offices were located. Morning light streamed through tall windows, illuminating portraits of past royals hanging on the walls. George watched in panic as the drone drifted past closed doors, its camera scanning everything. Then it stopped abruptly, outside a particular door, one George recognized immediately. His blood ran cold. This was Prince William's private study, a room where sensitive meetings and confidential discussions regularly took place. The drone hovered there for a moment, as if analyzing the door, then suddenly the door opened from inside. George ducked behind a marble column, peering out to see what would happen next. A figure emerged from the study, senior aide carrying a stack of folders. The aide didn't notice the drone at first and walked briskly down the corridor. The drone waited until the door began to swing closed, then darted inside with incredible speed. The door clicked shut. George felt his stomach drop. The drone was now inside Prince William's private study, recording everything. George stood frozen behind the column, his mind racing through impossible scenarios. Should he knock on the door and confess? Should he call security? Either option would likely end with him being fired or worse. He'd accidentally sent an active surveillance drone into one of the most sensitive rooms in the palace. There was no way to spin this positively. He waited for several agonizing minutes, hoping the drone would simply run out of power and fall to the floor. But these were military-grade machines, probably capable of operating for hours. George knew he had to act. He took a deep breath, straightened his uniform, and approached the study door. His hand trembled as he raised it to knock. Before his knuckles could touch the wood, the door suddenly opened. George found himself face to face with Lady Catherine Pembroke, Prince William's chief private secretary. She was a stern woman in her 60s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She looked George up and down with obvious suspicion. "Can I help you?" she asked coldly. George's mouth opened, but no words came out initially. He cleared his throat. "There's been a situation, ma'am. A technical malfunction. I need to retrieve a piece of equipment from the study immediately." Lady Pembroke's expression hardened. "The study is off-limits to maintenance staff without prior authorization. You know that." "Yes, ma'am, I understand. But this is urgent." A security drone accidentally activated and entered the room. "It's recording right now." Her eyes widened slightly, the first crack in her composed exterior. She glanced back into the study, then at George again. "Wait here," she commanded, then disappeared inside. Closing the door firmly behind her, George stood in the corridor, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool air. He could hear muffled voices from inside the study, but couldn't make out the words. After what felt like an eternity, the door opened again. This time, Lady Pembroke was accompanied by two security officers George didn't recognize. Their expressions were grim. "Come with us," one of them said, his tone leaving no room for discussion. George was escorted down the corridor and into a small security office he'd never seen before. The room was windowless and contained only a table, 4 chairs, and a mounted camera in the corner. They sat him down and began asking questions. How did the drone activate? Why was he in that storage room? Did anyone instruct him to deploy the drone? The questions came rapid fire, and George answered as truthfully as he could, his voice shaking. After 30 minutes of interrogation, the security officers left the room, locking the door behind them. George sat alone, his head in his hands. His simple mistake had spiraled into something much larger than he'd imagined. He thought about his wife, his daughter starting university next month, his modest pension. Everything felt suddenly at risk. What George didn't know was that at that very moment, the drone's recording was being reviewed in a secure viewing room elsewhere in the palace. And what that recording had captured would change everything. Prince William sat at his desk in another wing of the palace, reviewing correspondence, when his secure phone buzzed. The screen showed a priority message from his head of security, Marcus Thornhill. The message was brief but alarming. Urgent security incident. Need your immediate attention. Viewing room C. William set down his pen and stood up. Marcus never used the word urgent lightly. In his years working with the security team, William had learned to trust Marcus's judgment completely. The man was former military intelligence and had an almost supernatural ability to detect threats before they materialized. If Marcus said something needed immediate attention, it did. William walked briskly through the palace corridors, his mind running through possibilities. Had there been a breach? A threat from outside? He nodded politely to staff members he passed, but didn't stop to chat as he normally would. Within minutes, he arrived at Viewing Room C, a secure facility where security footage was analyzed. Marcus was waiting outside the door, his face uncharacteristically tense. "Your Royal Highness," he said, his voice low. "We have a situation that requires your personal discretion." A maintenance worker accidentally activated one of the new surveillance drones. It recorded approximately 12 minutes of footage inside your private study before we could retrieve it. William felt a cold prickle of concern. His study was where he conducted his most confidential business, where he met with advisors, took sensitive phone calls, and reviewed classified documents. 12 minutes was an eternity in that context. "What did it capture?" he asked. Marcus glanced around to ensure they were alone in the corridor. "That's what we need you to see, sir. The recording contains conversation that... Well, it's complicated. I think you need to watch it yourself." They entered the viewing room, a small space dominated by a large monitor and a control console. Marcus closed the door and locked it, then activated the screen. The video began playing. William recognized his study immediately, the view from a high angle near the ceiling. The timestamp showed it was from earlier that morning. In the video, William watched himself sitting at his desk, speaking on the phone. He remembered this call clearly. It was with a senior member of Parliament about an upcoming charity initiative. Nothing controversial there. But then the drone's camera shifted, focusing on the other side of the room. That's when William saw what Marcus was concerned about. His younger brother Harry appeared in the frame. Though William knew Harry wasn't actually in the study that morning, then William realized what he was watching. The drone had captured a television screen mounted on the wall, currently displaying a paused video call. The call had been from 3 days ago, and William had saved it to review later because the connection had been poor during certain parts. The recording showed Harry speaking, his face clearly visible on the screen. But the words he was saying made William's blood run cold. Harry was discussing private family matters, airing grievances about how he'd been treated, making claims about conversations that William knew had been taken completely out of context. Worse, Harry was speaking to someone off camera, someone who was clearly recording this conversation for a documentary or interview William watched as his own. Recorded self in the drone footage paused the video call, leaned back in his chair, and spoke to someone else in the room. Lady Catherine Pembroke appeared in the frame, holding a folder. William listened to his own voice, discussing a strategy for responding to Harry's upcoming media appearances. Mentioning private details about family dynamics that were never meant to be made public, the conversation continued, with William and Lady Catherine discussing contingency plans, public relations strategies, and even touching on financial arrangements that were strictly confidential. All of this captured by a drone that should never have been activated, let alone allowed into that room. Marcus paused the playback. The maintenance worker, George Mitchell, insists it was a complete accident. Our investigation supports his story. He has an impeccable record, no connection to media outlets, no suspicious financial activity. He appears to have simply pressed the wrong button while cataloging equipment. William sat down heavily in one of the chairs, processing what he'd just seen. Who else has viewed this recording? Only myself and one other senior security officer, Thomas Brennan. We retrieved the drone within minutes of realizing what happened. The footage is stored only on this isolated system, not connected to any network. But, double quotes, Marcus hesitated. But what? The drone was transmitting in real time to its base station in the storage facility. That transmission was encrypted. But for approximately 4 minutes before we shut down the base station, the signal was active. We don't believe anyone intercepted it, but we can't be completely certain. William felt the weight of the situation settling on his shoulders. If this recording became public, it would create a firestorm. The media would twist every word, every strategic discussion, into evidence of family conflict. His private frustrations, expressed in what he thought was a secure environment, would be dissected endlessly. And Harry, the footage of Harry's own private conversation could damage his brother's reputation as well. Regardless of their current differences, what are my options? William asked quietly. Marcus pulled up a document on a secondary screen. Legally, we're in a gray area. The recording was made accidentally on palace property. In your private space? So there's a strong argument for it being inadmissible as evidence of anything, and subject to immediate destruction. However, if we simply delete it, and if word somehow leaks that such a recording existed, we'll face accusations of cover-up. William stood and paced the small room. What about Mitchell, the maintenance worker? He's being held in a security office. He's terrified, convinced he'll lose his job. From what we can tell, he's a decent man who made an honest mistake. He has a family, a daughter about to start university. No criminal record, not even a parking ticket. William thought about his own children, about how a single mistake could derail a person's entire life. He thought about the recording, about the impossible position it put him in. Every instinct told him to have the footage destroyed, to bury this incident deep, and never speak of it again. But something about that approach felt wrong. I want to speak with Mitchell, William said suddenly. Marcus looked surprised. Sir, I'm not sure that's wise. The fewer people who know you're personally involved in this situation, the better. I disagree. This man accidentally recorded a private conversation in my study. I think I have the right to look him in the eye and determine for myself whether he's trustworthy. Marcus clearly wanted to argue further, but knew better than to push back when William's mind was made up. Very well, sir. I'll arrange it. But I recommend keeping it brief and ensuring we have proper security protocols in place. 20 minutes later, George Mitchell was brought into a different secure room. He looked pale and exhausted, his maintenance uniform rumpled. When he saw Prince William enter the room, he immediately stood and attempted an awkward bow, nearly losing his balance in the process. Please. Sit down, William said gently, taking a seat across the table from him. Marcus stood near the door, watching carefully. George sat, his hands clasped tightly together on the table. Your Royal Highness, I cannot express how deeply sorry I am for this incident. It was completely accidental, I swear it. I would never intentionally compromise your privacy or security. William studied the man's face, looking for any sign of deception. All he saw was genuine distress and remorse. Tell me exactly what happened in your own words. George recounted the entire morning, from arriving at the palace to finding the drone cases to the accidental activation. His story matched the security investigation perfectly. When he finished, his voice was barely above a whisper. I know I should have been more careful. I understand if I'm to be dismissed. I hope this won't cause problems for my family. William was quiet for a moment, considering his next words carefully. Mr. Mitchell, you've worked here for 3 years. Your supervisors speak highly of you. Your record is spotless. Do you understand what was captured on that recording? George shook his head. No, sir, they haven't told me anything. Just that it's sensitive. It contains private conversations about family matters, personal things that were never meant to be public. If this recording were to somehow reach the media, it would create significant difficulties not just for me, but for several people I care about. George's eyes widened with understanding and fresh horror. Sir, I could never. I don't even know how I would begin to. He struggled to find the words. I'm just a maintenance man. I have no interest in palace intrigue or media attention. I just want to do my job and go home to my family each day. William believed him. Every instinct he'd developed over years of meeting thousands of people told him this man was telling the truth. I believe you, Mr. Mitchell, but belief isn't enough in this situation. I need certainty. I need to know that what happened this morning will never be spoken of again to anyone. You have my word, sir. On my daughter's life, you have my word. William nodded slowly. Then here's what's going to happen. The recording will be destroyed completely and permanently. You will sign a non-disclosure agreement with very serious legal consequences if you ever speak about this incident. In return, you'll keep your job. There will be no formal reprimand on your record. This conversation never happened. George looked like he might cry from relief. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Don't thank me yet, William said seriously. Because if I'm wrong about you, if this trust is misplaced, the consequences won't just fall on you. They'll impact everyone I'm trying to protect. After George was escorted out, Marcus approached William. That was a risk, sir. Showing him mercy. Perhaps William agreed. But sometimes taking a calculated risk on someone's character is better than creating an enemy through harshness. Mitchell isn't the real problem here anyway. What do you mean? William's expression darkened. The real problem is that recording of Harry. Even with Mitchell's silence and the footage destroyed, I still heard what my brother is planning to say publicly, and I need to decide how to respond before he does. William spent the rest of that day in a state of quiet turmoil. He went through the motions of his scheduled engagements. A meeting with environmental advocates, brief appearance at a children's hospital charity event, and a dinner with foreign diplomats. But his mind kept returning to what he'd seen on that drone recording. Harry's words, spoken in what his brother clearly thought was a private moment, revealed plans that could damage the entire family that evening. After Catherine had put the children to bed, William sat in their private living room staring at a cold cup of tea. His wife entered quietly and sat beside him on the sofa, immediately sensing his troubled mood. "You've been somewhere else all day," Catherine said softly, taking his hand. "What's happened?" William debated how much to share. He and Catherine had always maintained complete honesty with each other. But this situation involved security matters and his brother. Still, he needed her counsel. She had better instincts about people and situations than almost anyone he knew. He told her everything about the drone incident, about George Mitchell, and most importantly, about what the recording had revealed regarding Harry's upcoming media plans. Catherine listened without interrupting, her expression growing more concerned as the story unfolded. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. What was Harry planning to reveal? She finally asked. Things that should stay private. Conversations from years ago, disagreements about how certain situations were handled, implications about family members' motivations, all framed in a way that will make headlines and sell documentaries, but will also hurt people I care about. Catherine squeezed his hand. The question is, what are you going to do about it? That's what I can't figure out. If I confront Harry directly, he'll know I somehow intercepted or learned about his private conversation. That could make things worse, drive an even deeper wedge between us. But if I do nothing and then his interview airs, I'll have missed the chance to minimize the damage. There's a third option, Catherine suggested. You reach out to him, but not about what you know. You attempt reconciliation before his interview happens. Maybe if he feels heard, if he feels there's still a connection, he'll reconsider what he's planning to say. William shook his head. Harry and I haven't had a real conversation in months. If I suddenly reach out now, he'll be suspicious. He'll think I've heard something through media channels and I'm trying to manipulate the situation. Then be honest, to a degree. Tell him you've been thinking about family, about the rift between you. Tell him you want to repair things before they become irreparable. You don't have to mention the recording at all. William considered this approach. It had merit, but it also felt risky. Harry had become unpredictable in recent years, sometimes receptive to olive branches, sometimes resentful of them. There was no guarantee that reaching out would help rather than harm. Over the next 2 days, William wrestled with his decision. He consulted with Marcus Thornhill, who advised a defensive strategy, preparing public relations responses for whatever Harry might reveal. He spoke with Lady Catherine Pembroke, who suggested a legal approach, having palace attorneys send a preemptive letter warning against disclosure of private family matters. But ultimately, William kept coming back to his wife's advice. The only path forward that didn't feel like escalation was a genuine attempt at connection. On Thursday evening, he picked up his phone and composed a message to Harry. He rewrote it 7 times, trying to find the right balance between warmth and respect for the distance that had grown between them. The final message was simple. I know it's been difficult between us. I've been thinking a lot about family lately, about the importance of not letting disagreements become permanent breaks. Would you be willing to talk, just the 2 of us? No agenda, no mediators, just brothers. He hit send before he could second-guess himself further. Then he waited. 3 hours passed with no response. William tried to focus on other matters, reviewing documents for an upcoming Commonwealth meeting, but his phone was never far from his thoughts. Finally, just after 11 at night, his phone buzzed. Harry's response appeared on the screen. Bit late for that, isn't it? But fine. Tomorrow, Kensington Gardens, the bench by the pond. 3 p.m. Come alone. The tone was guarded, almost hostile. But he'd agreed. That was something. William confirmed the meeting and tried to prepare himself mentally for what would likely be a difficult conversation. The next day, William cleared his afternoon schedule, telling his staff only that he needed personal time. Marcus objected strenuously to the prince going anywhere without at least distant security coverage, but William insisted. If Harry saw security personnel nearby, he'd never open up honestly. They compromised. Marcus would position 2 plainclothes officers in the general area of the park, far enough away to be unnoticeable, but close enough to respond if needed. William would carry an emergency beacon disguised as a regular phone. It felt excessive for meeting his own brother, but William understood Marcus was just doing his job. At 3 o'clock, William walked through Kensington Gardens, dressed in casual clothes. A light jacket, jeans, and a baseball cap pulled low. He'd become skilled over the years at moving through public spaces without drawing attention, and today the park was quiet enough that he reached the designated bench without incident. Harry was already there. Sitting at the far end of the bench, staring out at the pond, he didn't turn when William approached, didn't acknowledge his presence until William sat down beside him. "Hello," William said quietly. "Hello," Harry replied, his voice flat. They sat in silence for a moment, watching ducks glide across the water's surface. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," William tried again. Harry finally turned to look at him, and William was struck by how tired his brother looked. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his face had a gauntness that spoke of stress and poor sleep. "Why now?" Harry asked bluntly. "Why? After months of nothing, do you suddenly want to talk?" William had prepared for this question, but sitting here facing his brother, the rehearsed answers felt hollow. He decided on truth, as much truth as he could offer without revealing the drone incident. "Because I'm tired," he said simply. "I'm tired of the distance. I'm tired of hearing about you through news reports instead of actually speaking with you. I'm tired of our children growing up as strangers to each other." Harry's expression softened slightly, but suspicion remained. "Or maybe you heard I'm doing an interview, and you want to do damage control." William's heart sank. Harry already knew he knew, somehow. "What interview?" William asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. "Don't play stupid. Someone always leaks these things. I'm sure your intelligence network has kept you well informed about my media activities." William realized Harry was referring to normal palace awareness of media scheduling, not the drone recording specifically. He felt a small relief. "Harry, I'm not here to talk you out of anything or manage some media narrative. I'm here because you're my brother, and I miss you. It's that simple." "Nothing's simple with us anymore," Harry said bitterly. "Everything's about duty and protocol and protecting the institution. When did we stop just being brothers?" "I don't know," William admitted. "Somewhere along the way, between growing up and taking on responsibilities, between your path and mine diverging, we lost something. But it doesn't have to stay lost." Harry stood up abruptly and walked to the edge of the pond. William followed, giving him space, but staying close enough to continue the conversation. For several minutes, neither spoke. Then Harry's shoulders seemed to sag, and when he spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. "I've been so angry for so long," Harry said. "Angry at the system, at the constraints, at feeling like my voice didn't matter. And in that anger, I made decisions about how to fight back. Some of those decisions, I'm not sure they were right." William felt a glimmer of hope. This was more vulnerability than Harry had shown him in years. "It's not too late to change course," he said carefully. "Whatever you're planning, if you have doubts, you can always reconsider." Harry turned to face him. "Is that what this is? You trying to talk me out of the interview?" "No," William said firmly. "I'm saying that if you have things you need to say about your experience, about how you've been treated, I'm willing to listen. Here, now between us. Maybe if we actually talk about these things directly, you won't need to have those conversations in front of cameras. Harry studied his brother's face, searching for sincerity or manipulation. Whatever he saw there seemed to satisfy some internal test. "All right," he said finally. "Let's talk." "Really talk? But I warn you, you might not like everything you hear." They sat back down on the bench and Harry began to speak. He talked about feeling overshadowed, about the pressure of being the spare instead of the heir, about moments where he'd felt his concerns were dismissed by family members. William listened without interrupting. Even when Harry's version of events differed from his own memories, even when accusations felt unfair. When Harry finally ran out of words, William took a breath before responding. "Some of what you've said I don't agree with. My memories of certain situations are different. But I can hear that your pain is real, and I'm sorry for the ways I contributed to it, intentionally or not." Harry seemed surprised by this response. "That's it? No defense of the family? No lecture about duty and sacrifice? What would be the point?" William asked. "You've clearly thought deeply about all this. Nothing I say will change your perspective immediately. But maybe if we keep talking, if we rebuild some trust, we can find a way to understand each other better." They talked for another hour, not resolving everything, not magically fixing years of accumulated grievances, but making a start. As the afternoon light began to fade, they stood to leave. The meeting ended with an awkward but genuine embrace. "I'm still doing the interview," Harry said as they separated. "There are things I need to say publicly." "I understand," William replied, though his heart sank. "But maybe, going forward, we can talk to each other before talking to the world." Harry nodded slowly. "Maybe. Let's see how it goes." William watched his brother walk away across the park, disappearing into the twilight. He'd made his attempt at reconciliation, had offered an opening for connection. Whether it would be enough to change what Harry said publicly remained to be seen. But at least he'd tried. At least there was now a possibility of rebuilding something that had seemed completely broken. 3 weeks passed after the meeting in Kensington Gardens. William heard nothing from Harry, and he forced himself not to reach out first. The ball was in his brother's court now. Meanwhile, the drone incident had been officially closed by Palace security. The recording had been permanently destroyed, witnessed by Marcus Thornhill and 2 other senior officials. George Mitchell had signed his non-disclosure agreement and returned to work. Noticeably more careful in his duties, William tried to focus on his regular responsibilities. But the waiting was exhausting. Every morning he woke wondering if today would be the day Harry's interview aired. Every evening, he went to bed grateful for one more day of delay, even as the uncertainty gnawed at him. Then, on a rainy Tuesday morning in October, Marcus appeared at William's office door with an unusual expression on his face. Something between concern and confusion. "Sir, we've received a message through back channels. It's from Harry's team. He wants to meet again, and he's asking if the meeting can be at the palace this time." "Your private study, specifically?" William felt his pulse quicken. Why would Harry want to meet there, in the very room that had been accidentally recorded? Was this some kind of confrontation? Had Harry somehow learned about the drone incident after all? Did he say why? "No, sir. Just that it's important and time-sensitive." He suggested tomorrow afternoon. William considered declining, suggesting a neutral location instead. But curiosity and perhaps a sliver of hope made him agree. "Tell them yes. 2 o'clock tomorrow? Just Harry and myself? No staff on either side." The next day, William found himself pacing his study, checking his watch every few minutes. At precisely 2 o'clock, there was a knock on the door. Marcus escorted Harry inside, then withdrew, closing the door behind him. Harry looked different than he had in the park. More composed, more determined. He carried a leather document folder under his arm. They shook hands formally, and William gestured for Harry to sit in one of the comfortable chairs near the window. William took the chair opposite. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," Harry began, a formality that felt strange between brothers. "Of course. What's this about?" Harry opened the folder and pulled out several pages of printed text. William recognized them immediately as interview transcripts, his stomach tightening. "This is what I was planning to say," Harry explained. "The full interview, every question and answer, every revelation and accusation. I want you to read it before it airs." William was surprised by this gesture, but wary of the motivation behind it. "Why? Because you asked me to talk to you before talking to the world. This is me trying to honor that, even if it's a bit backward." Harry handed him the pages. "Read it. I'll wait." William took the transcripts and began reading. The content was as damaging as he'd feared, maybe worse. Harry spoke about feeling abandoned by the family, about conversations where his concerns were dismissed, about the pressure to conform to expectations that felt suffocating. He named specific incidents, quoted private conversations, and shared details about family dynamics that were nobody's business but their own. But as William continued reading, he noticed something. Throughout the interview, even when expressing frustration and pain, Harry never attacked William personally. He criticized the institution, the system, the way things had always been done, but when speaking about his brother specifically, there was sadness rather than malice. William set down the last page and looked at Harry. "This will cause problems. You know that." "I do, but these are things I need to say. I've been silent too long, and that silence has been eating me alive." William stood and walked to the window, looking out at the garden below. Rain streaked the glass, blurring the carefully maintained landscape into impressionist smears of green and gray. "What if I asked you not to do it? As your brother? Not as a representative of the family? Then I'd tell you I'm sorry, but I can't honor that request. This isn't about hurting you or anyone else. It's about finally speaking my truth." William turned back to face him. "Your truth? What about my truth? What about the fact that my memory of some of these events is completely different from yours?" "Then tell your truth," Harry said. "I'm not asking you to stay silent. If you want to respond, respond. But I need to do this." They stared at each other across the study, years of complicated history hanging in the air between them. Finally, William returned to his chair and sat down heavily. "When does it air?" "Next week. Tuesday evening." William did the mental calculation. That gave him a week to prepare, to warn certain family members, to get public relations strategies in place. It wasn't much time, but it was something. "Thank you for telling me," he said quietly. "And for showing me this first. I know you didn't have to." Harry's expression softened slightly. "Our conversation in the park, it meant something to me. I don't want us to be enemies, Will. Even if we disagree, even if we're angry, I don't want that." "Neither do I," William admitted. "But this," he gestured at the transcripts, "this is going to make things very difficult between us for a while. But maybe after the dust settles, after everyone has said what they need to say, maybe we can find our way to something better." After Harry left, William sat alone in his study for a long time. He thought about the chain of events that had led to this moment. If George Mitchell hadn't accidentally activated that drone, William would have had no warning about Harry's media plans. He would have been blindsided by the interview, forced to react in real time without preparation. But the drone had activated, and while the recording had been destroyed, the knowledge it contained had pushed William to reach out to Harry to attempt reconciliation. That attempt hadn't prevented the interview from happening, but it had created enough connection between them that Harry now felt compelled to give William advance warning. In an odd way, George's mistake had led to something almost positive. William called Marcus to his study. "The interview Harry mentioned weeks ago, it's confirmed for next Tuesday. I need you to alert the communications team. We'll need prepared responses, context for journalists, the full crisis management apparatus." Marcus nodded grimly. "How bad is it, sir?" "Bad enough, but it could have been worse. At least we have time to prepare now." That evening, William told Catherine everything. She listened patiently, then asked the question that had been nagging at William all afternoon. "Do you think showing you the transcripts was Harry's way of asking permission? Like maybe if you'd reacted differently, he might have reconsidered." William had wondered the same thing. Maybe he wanted to prove he could be trusted with his word. That when he says he'll talk to me before the world, he means it. "Either way, I didn't feel right asking him to kill the interview entirely. Those are his experiences, his feelings. Who am I to say he can't share them, even if it damages the family? Even then, because the alternative, trying to silence him, that would damage our relationship permanently. At least this way, there's still a chance for something better on the other side. The week before the interview aired was chaotic. William met with communications advisors, legal teams, and senior family members. Everyone had opinions about how to respond, ranging from aggressive rebuttal to dignified silence. William listened to all the advice, knowing that ultimately the decision would be his. He also made a point of checking in on George Mitchell. Through Marcus, he learned that George had kept his word completely. He'd told no one about the drone incident, not even his wife. He simply went to work each day, performed his duties with extra caution, and went home. In appreciation, William arranged for a modest pay increase for George and ensured his daughter received a small, educational grant from one of the palace's charitable funds. These gestures were done quietly, through intermediaries, so George would never have to feel indebted or compromised. On the Tuesday evening the interview aired, William watched it with Catherine in their private quarters. It was as difficult as he'd expected, hearing his brother's pain expressed so publicly. Seeing private family matters dissected for entertainment. Social media erupted within minutes, with commentators taking sides. Supporters and critics arguing, headlines being written in real time. But William also noticed something the transcripts hadn't fully conveyed. In the actual footage, when Harry spoke about William specifically, there was a sadness in his eyes, a longing for connection that came through despite his words. The audience saw a complicated family drama, but William saw his brother's pain. The next morning, William released a carefully worded statement. It acknowledged Harry's right to share his perspective, expressed sadness that Harry had felt unable to resolve these issues within the family, and stated that the door was always open for private conversation and reconciliation. The statement was measured, not defensive, and it didn't engage with specific accusations. The media circus continued for weeks, but slowly, gradually, the intensity faded. New stories replaced old ones. The interview became history rather than breaking news. 6 weeks after the interview aired, William received a text message from Harry. Just 3 words. Thank you for listening. William stared at the message for a long time before responding with equal brevity. Always. It wasn't a resolution. It wasn't even the beginning of a true reconciliation. But it was a thread, a thin connection that might, with time and care, be strengthened into something more substantial. 4 months later, on Christmas morning, William's children were opening presents in the living room when there was an unexpected knock at the door. Catherine went to answer it and returned with a surprised smile. "You have a visitor," she said to William. Harry stood in the doorway, holding a bag of wrapped gifts. He looked uncertain, almost shy. William stood, walked over to his brother, and pulled him into an embrace. "Come in," William said. "Your family." As Harry stepped inside and was immediately swarmed by excited nieces and nephews, William caught Catherine's eye. She smiled and nodded, understanding his unspoken thought. Sometimes the most circuitous paths led to the most important destinations. And somewhere across London, George Mitchell was having Christmas breakfast with his own family, completely unaware that his accidental drone activation had set in motion a chain of events that, despite all the chaos and difficulty, had ultimately helped 2 brothers find their way back toward each other. He only knew that he was grateful to still have his job, grateful for the mysterious scholarship that was helping his daughter through university, and grateful that the worst day of his professional life had somehow not ended in catastrophe after all. The Palace drone that had caused so much trouble sat decommissioned in a storage facility, its recording deleted, its purpose served in ways no one had intended, and few would ever know. In the complicated machinery of royal life, where everything was planned and orchestrated, sometimes it was the accidents that mattered most.